experiences are. From a car accident, disorder. The definition of that disorder does not cover what those experiences are. Complex psychological trauma involves multiple repetitive chronic stressors. So it's not an event. You can have PTSD. Because we have come to understand that there are people who suffer from a different sort of trauma that is much more complex and is not under post-traumatic stress disorder. The definition of that disorder does not cover what those experiences are. Complex psychological trauma involves multiple repetitive chronic stressors. So it's not an event. You can have PTSD from a car accident, from an incident in a war, from gun violence on a street, from all kinds of things. But complex trauma comes when somebody is repeatedly, chronically exposed to traumatic events over years. It usually involves harm from those people in their lives who should have been caregivers. So the ones out, you can have a client or patient come in to see you, or you can have somebody in your church or whatever ministry you have who appears to be one way, but is actually profoundly compromised internally because of this kind of chronic, over the lifespan traumatizing. So one of the things we found out is that in complex and traumatic stressors, they are generally interpersonal. You know, you can get traumatized by a tsunami, but when you have been traumatized by your own father, it's a whole different thing. They are premeditated. They are always caused by other human beings. They involve profound relational betrayal, because it's usually some kind of caregiver, and profound deception. So it's usually repeated and chronic, and so what we have is an individual, particularly, let's think about a child, being marinated in trauma from birth. So this is a child who is
I'm scared of what I'm hiding from myself still. Oh my gosh. I feel I really haven't let myself cry. I really haven't let myself cry. I really haven't let myself cry. I'm scared of what I'm hiding from myself still. Oh my gosh. I feel sick all the time. Like I'm gonna throw up. My head is spinning. Oh my God. My vision is fucking does strange things. This really fucks our heads up. Not just our heads. But more than that. More than that, it's this filth on your soul. Like marinated in it, bathed in it. Like, no matter how much I think about all the healing and how far away, like, it's so deep in my fucking soul. I don't know if that's something that I could ever get clean. God damn it. But I'm gonna fucking try. Because to the bitter end. To the bitter end. For a while there, I got to feel good about myself because I tapped into my gifts. And I did something that I know not many people could do. And that's just for me. And it's hard. It's hard. I just trying to do the things that work. Sorry, y'all. I too am blown away by it. Anyways, hey, there's positives, you know? And look at that. I'm hiding from myself still. Oh my gosh. I feel sick all the time. Like I'm gonna throw up. My head is spinning. Oh my God. My vision is fucking does strange things. This really fucks our heads up. Not just our heads. But more than that. More than that, it's this filth on your soul. Like marinated in it, bathed in it. Like, no matter how much I think about all the healing and how far away, like, it's so deep in my fucking soul. I don't know if that's something that I could ever get clean. God damn it. But I'm gonna fucking try. Because to the bitter end.
some of the factors involved in a situation that produces complex trauma. First of all, thinking again of a child, it results in insecure and disorganized attachments. How do you bond with parents who damage you chronically? They are exploited wherever they are vulnerable, and children are, of course, always vulnerable. They are used. Victims of this kind of trauma live in constant distress. And that has profound physiological impact on the brain, on the adrenal gland, all kinds of things that can often be things that last lifelong. They are not only under constant distress, but there's no exit door. And if you're 5 years old, you can't get away. So they have gross insecurity, instability, and ongoing pain and suffering. And in such an environment, the individual never gets to regain emotional equilibrium. You think about perhaps a car accident, maybe that some of you have been in or witnessed, and how everything's thrown out of kilter. And it takes a while, particularly if you were driving, for you to even think about getting behind the wheel again and all of those things. But eventually you get some sort of emotional equilibrium, and little by little can claim that area of your life back. But when you live with chronic trauma, there's no place to do that. There's no equilibrium to gain. So for many, trauma is not a terrifying event, which is how PTSD has been described. It is rather a terrifying life. So as a result of chronic and interpersonal trauma, this individual will be extremely vigilant, very watchful for danger all the time, constantly expecting it, live with chronic anxiety and terror. All of their psychological energy is bent by necessity toward coping, which means things like hiding, self-protecting, rather than having that psychological energy bent toward learning and growing, which is where a healthy child in a healthy environment gets to go. They get to imagine. Of self, a personhood, as we might say, an awareness and sense, a definition. Complex trauma involves betrayal at its core. The effect of chronic interpersonal violence on that process is staggering. Secondly, complex trauma involves betrayal at its core. You think about this. The person is being hurt by someone they should be able to trust. Parent, grandparent, siblings, uncles and aunts, coach, pastor, teacher. Those are all the people that along the way of the child's growing who should be caretaking, protecting, teaching, nurturing. Those who should help not only fail to help, but repeatedly morally damage the child and erode their sense of self. So the self is marinated in abandonment, deception, blame, humiliation, and isolation. You know, when you marinate something, you do it so the flavor gets all the way in. So when you're a child being marinated in these things, it gets all the way in. Third, as a result, the child victim develops a deep and abiding sense of shame. Anybody who's been around children for just a small amount of time knows that children
live and direct. Oh, live? Did I say I'm alive? Oh my god, just barely. I've had one of those 24 hours of live. Did I say I'm alive? Welcome home, fam. Coming live and direct. Oh, live? Did I say I'm alive? Oh my god, just barely. I've had one of those 24 hours of holy kicking my motherfucking ass. Real hard, real hard. This is the work. Man. Which reminds me, I'm going to probably remember too, I've been going through and witnessing it as it surfaces and tries to filter its way out of my fucking system, along with the motherfucking itty bitty like grains of sand of emotional, like, I mean, and just everything. Like, contending with this shit, man, is no joke. But it got me real present. It's steady getting me present to the correlation of what I was speaking to before, which is how we can look at this in a positive light. We can look at this in a positive light. It sucks like a motherfucker, but it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose. And it has to do with epigenetics and altering our genes and shit. Ooh. Okay. It's not just all that fluffy cloud shit, though. No. Nope. This is like a motherfucking call to action to the species. And, Cosmos and Mother Nature are not fucking around. Alright, so, rough. Gnarly day. All the fun symptoms. And I got to do something for me. And so I do what I do. I've really been noticing the extremes of my behaviors, my conditioning of just being around people, noticing how I'm feeling and what actions I take, how I communicate, my habits. They're becoming even more clear to me of what feels necessary, my everyday way of being, and even being in my body, but having my like observer super present, like watching how much I go out of my way to try not to exist around people, how often I hide and struggle and don't speak and, you know, don't want my shadow to get in the way. Not my, like, badass shadow, scary stuff. I mean, my shadow on the ground. You know what I mean? This thing. I don't want that to get in anyone's way. Along with other things. Tied to my worth. Tied to what was allowed. I'm listening to the things that I'm saying. And it's sad. I have to like disconnect from that girl for a second. You're like, dude, I feel hella bad for that girl. You could just tell. Just little things like, goddamn. I mean, she acts hella cruel and like shit ain't shit, but you can tell by what she says and how she acts like her shit must have been fucked up, man. It was. But I ain't original. Because the evil that we're facing is the evil in us. Straight up. So, I gotta do my thing, but on that note, I spent all day hiding and being frozen and paralyzed. Like for real, just stuck. That's one of the things. Can't move. Can't move. Can't go anywhere. Mind is spinning. Nothing. Not inching to the left or right is a good decision. Running all the probabilities. Anxiety through the motherfucking root, like nervous system shot. Intrusive thoughts. Fucked up ass flashbacks. Emotional flashbacks. And like straight up frozen. Paralysis. Like can't do shit. Oh, no. You know? So between that and just hiding. Yeah. So this goes along with it. There are things that I need to do in order for me to even be able to like remotely function. And most of those things have been taken off the table as possibilities. Like, for instance, creating art. I don't have supplies, I don't have whatever. You know, needing to just like play music hella loud and dance or whatever. And I'm sure Mickey wouldn't mind, but like, anyways. Or doing stuff like this, where I go and compulsively collect things and walk for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours until my feet are swollen. Because I'm moving the energy and I'm communing with motherfucking nature. Those things are essential, so I've been doing that, but then I like to do other things and put it to work. Also, saying it out loud, it lives. Say that my family is sick. And shame has to come. I'm not ashamed. I'm sad that I have to fucking say that less shame has to come. I'm not ashamed. I'm sad that I have to fucking say that that's the truth. I'm sad that that's my fucking truth. I'm sad that that's my life. I'm not ashamed at all for saying my family is sick. My mother is sick. And everybody in my family allowed me to be hurt. And everyone that knew me, that I considered a friend, or anyone who even remotely cared about me. Every single person in my life. I learned that they did not care about me. They did not love me. And I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that I was taught that that was okay, that I learned that that was okay, that I lived that being okay. I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed that I'm afraid to say their names. I'm ashamed that I still feel bad for the people that hurt me and they don't think about me. I feel ashamed that I didn't scream. I feel ashamed every time I apologize for shit I should not have. I feel ashamed at how often and how good I was at betraying myself. I feel ashamed for how much I let people use me. I feel ashamed. I feel ashamed that my love and my heart and my ability to fight for what I love, to go to the end of the earth, got twisted up and exploited and dirtied to the point where I gave all that love and end of the earth shit to only people that hurt me. I'm ashamed. I am fucking ashamed. I'm ashamed that I had to accept that from you, and I believed it. I'm ashamed. Every time I didn't yell. I'm ashamed every time I lied and I sold myself out. I'm ashamed every time I took the fucking blame. I'm ashamed every time I... Ashamed. My mother is sick. I'm sad that that's my fucking truth. I'm sad that that's my life. It lives. And less shame has to come. I'm not ashamed. I'm sad that I have to fucking say that that's the truth. I'm sad that that's my fucking truth. I'm sad that that's my life. I'm not ashamed at all for saying my family is sick. My mother is sick. And everybody in my family allowed me to be hurt. And everyone that knew me, that I considered a friend, or anyone who even remotely cared about me, every single person in my life, I learned that they did not care about me. They did not love me. And I'm ashamed that I was taught that that was okay, that I learned that that was okay, that I lived that being okay. I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed that I'm afraid to say their names. I'm ashamed that I still feel bad for the people that hurt me and they don't think about me. I feel ashamed that I didn't scream. I feel ashamed every time I apologize for shit I should not have. I feel ashamed how often and how good I was at betraying myself. I feel ashamed for how much I let people use me. I feel ashamed. I feel ashamed that my love and my heart and my ability to fight for what I love, to go to the ends of the earth, got twisted up and exploited and dirtied to the point where I gave all that love and ends of the earth shit to only people that hurt me. I'm ashamed. I am fucking ashamed. I'm ashamed that I had to accept that for me, and I believed it. I'm ashamed. Every time I didn't yell. I'm ashamed every time I lied and I sold myself out. I'm ashamed every time I took the fucking blame. I'm ashamed every time I begged, bribed, bartered. Settled. And I'm still ashamed that I even give a fuck at all about what people think about me. Especially the people that left me to die many times. I'm ashamed. There's things people will never know. Never. There's so much shame. I'm ashamed that I was okay with being murdered. I was okay with being murdered and raped and robbed and exploited and pimped out and sold and neglected and denied, disrespected, violated, fucking all those words. I'm just ashamed that I didn't recognize my fucking enemies. I'm not ashamed that I loved even my enemy that I didn't know was my enemy. I just would have liked to have consented to the
What we need to know as people who interact with people in a very traumatizing world, that we need an understanding of complex trauma, because if we're going to help people who've been marinated in this stuff, we need to know as people who interact with people in a very traumatizing world, that we need an understanding of complex trauma, because if we're going to help people who've been marinated in this stuff, we want to consider really who they are and understand how they see us and hear us. Because oftentimes we'll see the damage and we'll want to help, but if we don't understand who we're helping, we will actually not help and sometimes do damage. So there are parts of the person that are altered when they are marinated in trauma, and I want to go through some of those, the things that change as the child develops. So when you get to be an adult, these things are different than they would have been in a healthy environment. The first has to do with regulating your emotions and your impulses. That's profoundly impacted when you're marinated like this. People who have been in prolonged trauma tend to overreact to stress. They become easily overwhelmed. They exhibit intense anger or rage. They have very great difficulty calming themselves down. They do not know how to self-soothe. They are often self-destructive. Eating disorders, addictions, self-injury, cutting, things like that. They don't know how to modulate anger and other feelings. They don't know how to manage impulses, like an impulse for suicide, or sexual acting out, or risk-taking behavior. Sometimes they will modulate their feelings by doing things we think are bad for them, and we would be right. But for example, addictions and self-harm make people feel numb. To somebody who has all of these symptoms, that's a good place to live. So they have to do something destructive in order to have any sense of quiet or peace. Second, we also see alterations or changes in the way the person is able to be attentive or conscious about things. Chronic trauma is, by definition, inescapable. It's very distressing. It overwhelms all the normal coping mechanisms that humans use. You know, if somebody's hurting you, you get away if you can. Or you fight back if you can. Or you tell them to stop. Or you get help. None of those things work when a child is being chronically traumatized. And so when there's no way to get away from that which is terrifying and overwhelming, the only way to get away is in here. And so children who live like this often use dissociation, which is simply a way of taking the mind away from the present and putting it someplace inside that actually isn't out here in the physical world. So you might talk to people. It has a similar effect to addictions because it helps them get removed from the trauma. So you might talk to somebody who will say something to you like, you know, when I was a little girl, I used to feel like I was able to hide up in the corner of the ceiling under the paper on the wallflower. And what you come to find out is that that's where she took herself in her mind while she was being sexually abused. So what happens is that capacity to leave the present and go be someplace else in your mind gets habituated over time. And one of the things that that does is make people who are terrified all the time they're going to get hurt not able to protect themselves. One of the things the research has showed with no protection. What happens when the mind leaves like that and dissociates is that the information and the experiences are not regulated. And so it's as if somebody had a bunch of file drawers in their head. And so this thing that happened when I was 3 in my bedroom goes in this file, and this thing that happened when I was 12 and at my uncle's farm goes in this file. And what you will find with people who have suffered from complex trauma or this disorder is they can't tell you a story of their lives. They can give you pieces like this, but they've never made a narrative out of it because in their mind they kept leaving what was happening. And of course, trauma, if we really look at it, defies our normal categories. I spent 4 hours yesterday at Auschwitz. It defies normal categories. You can say it was bad. You can say it was evil. I mean, even that doesn't say it. So here you have a child growing up with things that adults can't put into words. She'd be stark raving mad. So on the one hand, nobody touches her except to hit her. And in addition to all of this going on in her home, the voices you heard, the smells, the pain, she'd be stark raving mad. So on the one hand, you have these people developing these tremendous resources by dissociating, which leaves them unprotected and without a narrative, neither of which is good for people as adults. But on the other hand, if they didn't do that while it was happening, they would be insane. If you cannot escape physically, the one possible coping mechanism is to escape in your mind. So abuse like that in certain places with certain people causes people to split their brains. There's a very excellent book that was published in 1991 by Lawrence Langer, Langer, called Holocaust Testimonies, The Ruins of Memory. And I was fascinated when I first read it in the 90s. He was studying the memories of those who survived the Nazi Holocaust. And what he realized was that their memories, again, did not tell a narrative. They were all split up. Langer says that memory functions or it continues on whether or not we talk about it. And he says that since memory cannot be silenced in the mind, it might as well be heard. The story needs to be told. The point is whether memory is spoken or not, it continues to impact the life. It often speaks through symptoms, even when someone does not consciously remember the cause of those symptoms. Langer uses the term anguished memory. It's quite a phrase. It refers to memory that people have stored that assaults and finally divides the self. And he said the Holocaust survivors talk about the inability to take their times in the death camps and then tell the story and link it right into their freedom, their marriage, their children, all of those things. You can't make a story out of that. One woman said, I split myself. It wasn't me there. It just wasn't me. I was somebody else. Another one said, my head is filled with garbage and all these images, and sounds, smells, and you can't cut it out. But it's there. It's like there's another skin beneath this skin, and you can't shed it. I am not like you. You have one vision of life. I have two. One more, there's a sort of division, a compartmentalizing of what happened, and it's very tightly separated, but it really isn't. It must not interfere in my life today, the one that I have that's safe and good. The other must not become so overwhelming. It will make me unable to function in my now normal life. The double of Auschwitz does not mingle with my present life. It is as if it were not me at all. So, if you think about it, these are Holocaust survivors, but these are the types of things that people say who have grown up as children in chronic traumatic situations. The way we perceive ourselves. And again, if we've raised children, been around small children. All right, the next category in terms of alterations is destruction of the way we perceive ourselves. And again, if we've raised children, been around small children, they're just trying to figure out who they are. You start out with an infant who sees this thing going across its eyes and doesn't even know it's its own hand attached to its own body and actually can do something about it. They're developing a sense of self in very basic ways that get more complex as time goes on. What they end up developing as a sense of self is, I'm damaged, flawed, I'm ineffective, I'm incompetent, I couldn't stop it, I'm full of shame, I'm marked, everybody can tell, I'm unlovable and undesirable, and I'm helpless. Victims blame themselves and believe no one will understand, and so they try to forget or they minimize horrific evil. They carry a great sense of shame, not just about what was done to them, but thinking that it was done because of who they are. This is the one who rapes me at night. And so there's a particular bond there. That same bond is in domestic violence victims, and they live with a batterer. It's in trafficked victims, many of whom call their pimps daddy. It's in incest victims, bicycle, who make sure I'm registered at the school. Things in a child's brain. So these victims, many of whom call their pimps daddy. It's in incest victims. The bonding is necessary for the child to grow up, but it's also a terrible dilemma. Fifth, we see distortions in relationships. Obviously, repetitive and premeditated abuse can result in all kinds of disorders. When an individual is chronically mistreated and abused, it often leads to recurring victimization. It leads to the inability to trust, and sometimes to victimizing others. Victims are often unable to feel any intimacy with somebody. They have no model in their minds for what a healthy relationship should look like. And so they don't know how to make good or wise judgments. You know, you can't do what you've never seen and can't imagine. You know, how do you have a healthy marriage if you've never seen one, and so you really can't even picture it in your head? Sometimes they see warning signs in relationships, sometimes they don't. When they don't, they're re-victimized. But when they do, they are often immediately put into a state of feeling helpless. There's nothing I can do about it. These struggles will impact you as you work with them, because the struggle to trust, obviously then, somebody comes to talk to you, you're going to be the next person they don't trust. And we want them to feel safe. We probably work hard for them to feel safe in their time with us. But if you say to them, it's okay, it's safe here, why would they believe you? They're not going to. They may act like they do because they want them to be compliant and not upset people. But you can't trust that they really trust. That's something that's won over time, and usually a long time. The sixth category is a big word we call somatization. This is a new area. It's often not understood. There's growing research that shows that chronic trauma impacts the body physiologically and the brain, changes the brain. Chronic exposure to stress compromises the stress response system in the body, the capacity to evaluate stimuli, to encode verbal memory, and it hinders information processing. So you take that information right there and think, okay, what happens to a little boy who's trying to get through school and learn how to read, and all that stuff's happening to his body and his mind? Traumatized individuals have overreactive nervous systems. You know, one of those, which we're familiar with from PTSD, is the exaggerated startle response. You know, if you come up behind somebody who's been traumatized, they'll jump through the ceiling. Overproduction of certain chemicals results in constant anxiety. They don't know what it's like not to feel anxious. They have great difficulty sleeping, which of course has a great impact on their health. Current research has found immune system dysfunctions in many women with histories of chronic childhood abuse. And I have watched this through the years. I'm not a medical doctor. It's puzzled me. The reaction of the medical community 20, 25 years ago was, it's not really a disorder, they made it up in their minds for attention or whatever. But research is now showing actually that chronic childhood abuse impacts our autoimmune stuff, it causes autoimmune diseases. So patients often end up silent and treated with disbelief and hostility. I've had patients who've undergone 10, 12 unnecessary surgeries because somebody felt like they needed to do something to tell them that they would be better now, only it didn't work, and it didn't work because it wasn't really about the physical pain they were feeling. It was about the emotional pain and the story of their lives that was still untouched by all of the surgeries. The final category is changes in meaning, which obviously is a whole spiritual impact. Results in despair, hopelessness, or the loss of former beliefs. These clients have a very difficult time making sense out of life. And they believe that the God who allows such abuse is very confusing at best and evil at worst. So to process a history of chronic, brutal trauma threatens every belief formerly or currently held. And I can tell you that if you sit with people like this, it'll affect your faith as well. So following the traumatic experience, every human being, no matter their age, has to make the heartbreaking adjustment to a world that is full of losses. So if you're a 5-year-old girl or boy and you've just been raped by a family member, yesterday was one world and today and the rest of your life is another. If you're a college student and you were raped on a campus, if you're a combat vet who never saw violence before and you went to war and lost your buddies to IEDs or whatever, you have a before and an after. When trauma begins in early childhood, it's all that is known. There is no before. Trauma involves an event that threatens life or safety. It takes away choice. You don't get to say whether you want it or not, and results in overwhelming fear. When these things happen to human beings, they feel alone, they often are. They feel helpless, they often are, humiliated, and without hope. So following trauma, a portion of the person, if not the whole person, turns inward, away from life. They can't handle outside here and in here at the same time. So you will sometimes see that in children who can't handle what's happening to them, and so they abandon life and flunk out of school and do all kinds of things. They don't proactively engage with life because so much of their energy is turned inside. Eventually, however, post-trauma, life is at some point going to have to go on if the person is going to return to the outside world. So what kinds of things are needed to help people face what's inside, remember well and truthfully, and yet still be able to return to life and to good things, like relationships? Recovery, and this is a very important statement, so I want you to really hear it, and we'll work with it a little bit later. Recovery involves a reversal of the experience of trauma. So you have to understand the dynamics of trauma so that you can reverse the dynamics in whatever caregiving relationship you have with them. Trauma silences human beings, partly because there's no words to really describe what that was like. It brings emotional darkness, isolation, because you feel like nobody cares, or even if they did, they wouldn't understand. It makes time stand still, because we get so lost in what happened, we cannot see ahead. We've lost hope. So there are three main things that need to occur to reverse the trauma. All three must happen. One is not enough. And the three things are this: talking, tears, and time. Now, talking is part of being human. It's how God made us. It's actually one of the ways we're like him. He talks, we talk. He created all things at the beginning through his voice. He has told us who he is through his written word and through his word made flesh. He means for us to talk. He means for us to express ourselves, to dialogue with him and with each other, to be creative in that expression, to experiment, to imagine, to make things happen that have never been on the earth before. When somebody does not talk, and I don't just mean words, though that's certainly significant, but express themselves in some way, if all that's shut down, they're broken. Now, there may be something physically wrong, but there also may be a tremendous amount of emotional wounding that causes it. And sometimes people do not talk at all, or do not talk about a particular event because the pain is so great, they cannot find the words. Or the other thing they do is they keep saying the same thing over and over again, trying to find the right words and get relief, only it doesn't do anything. When Ground Zero happened in New York, I was up in New York a month after that to speak at a conference on trauma for obvious reasons. And I was with a woman who had been in the towers and had obviously managed to get out. And she was standing on the sidewalk watching as the people were jumping. And the only thing she could say to me was, and she must have said it 50 times, I saw the color of their ties. That's all she could tell me about that story. Now, over time, that story took on, she was able to tell me how she got out and how she got on the subway and got away from all of that. But at the beginning, that's all she could do. So it's not uncommon for somebody, like a child even, he hurt me. Well, honey, how did he hurt you? He hurt me. Can you show me where? He hurt me. That's all she can say. Talking is absolutely necessary for recovery. Words are inadequate, and that must be honored. Whatever narrative they eventually give you really doesn't cover it. But to remain silent is to fail to honor the event and the memory. And honor the event, not the evil of the event, but to live in the truth of what really happened and not pretend. by saying it was not only did it really happen, but it was really evil. And it really did damage. And if you've worked with victims, and they'll say, well, yes, I was sexually abused, but I've already dealt with it, and now I need you to help me with this. Well, can you tell me what that means, that you already dealt with it? I just said that it happened. It was no big deal. Ding. Not dealt with. And so talking is not just fact stating, it's expressing what happened and the impact of it on the person. It dishonors victims when we are silent about their experience, or pretend it did not happen, or was not important. And unfortunately, this has happened a great deal in the church. We have silenced victims of domestic violence, we've silenced victims of sexual abuse and rape, we've silenced combat vets. And we give them a verse and tell them to be quiet. Talking says, I'm here, I'm alive, which for some people with chronic trauma, that's an amazing statement. And what happened to me was wrong, and it wasn't my wrong. I'm damaged by it. Justice is needed, but so is care for my broken heart. At the beginning, sometimes people are so silenced, they can't talk in words. So sometimes you might sit with somebody who's traumatized and all they can do is cry or moan or rock. Sometimes I use nonverbal things. When they say, I can't tell you, can you draw me a picture of this? They can do that. I had a ballerina as a client many, many years ago who could not tell me the story about her grandfather. So I said, go home and design a dance that tells the story. So she did. She came back and she danced. And then I knew the story. And then I could work with her to help her put words to what she had danced. So many times, people need us to sit with them in silence. God commended Job's friends when they did that part. It's a way of joining with them. So they're not alone in the darkness. There is someone else there. Eventually, words will and must come. It's part of how you get power over something, is to be able to tell it. Sometimes people need help. So sometimes, again, even though people are starting to talk, I'll just give them one word, and if it describes what you felt or saw, just nod your head. Scary? Pain? Good? So you're helping them find words. Little by little, they give you pieces of the story. And trauma stories do not come out with a beginning, a middle, and an end. They come out like this, and eventually you have to put the puzzle together. Talking is about telling the truth. It connects the survivor to another person, and it restores dignity because you're willing to sit there and listen and honor them. It gives them choice because they can decide when to tell, what to say, and when to stop. It's not yours to choose. And again, remember my sentence, trauma recovery is the reversal of the dynamics of the trauma. The dynamics of the trauma were coercion. You had no choice. So forcing somebody to tell their story in a therapy session or coming alongside them is to copy a dynamic of trauma. You're not helping. Yes, they need to talk, but if they do it under coercion, that feels to them like the perpetrator. Injustice and violence and abuse teach us lies. They teach us that we're worthless and do not matter. Trauma tells the truth and gives dignity. Violence and abuse disconnect us from relationships, and we're alone and not considered. Telling the trauma story gives a place for caring connection with you. Trauma requires talking and being repeated and grasped. Trauma recovery also requires tears. Facing a new world full of losses brings incredible grief. And I often find that the grief feelings are what victims are most afraid of touching. They can tell you a story sort of like a robot. Just don't get me talking about how I feel. They think if they start to grieve, they'll never stop. They have feelings of fear and sadness and isolation and shame and despair, anger. They're strong emotions. They're hard to experience, and they have probably not been taught how to regulate themselves so they're not completely overwhelmed again by their own feelings. But feelings must be expressed because they tell the story as much as the words do. And part of what they tell is the story of the impact. They express what trauma did to the victim in the same way blood shows what a cut did to the skin. So it's like seeing and acknowledging the physical wounds on the body after an accident. For some people, words come first. And again, they may have to come non-verbally. But eventually, so sometimes people will tell the story in a very rote way, but eventually you go back and revisit the story and say, okay, you told me this happened to you when you were 6. Can you tell me what you felt about that then? No. Well, can you tell me what you feel about it now? If it were another 6-year-old, how would you feel? So you back it up when they can't do it until they can. It's very important for us to remember that telling a trauma story, facing the truth that you wish were not true, and expressing the emotions that accompany takes tremendous courage. Many people can't do it alone and shouldn't. They need a safe connection with a caring, wise, and patient person to grant them the courage to face the truth. Many emotions can't be adequately expressed in words. And again, so I told you about the ballerina. You look for not just the story to be told in words, but the feeling. Sometimes people will paint something and it's just black and red, and that's it. They're full of rage and despair. There's a verse in the book of Psalms in chapter 56 that says, "You," meaning God, "have taken account of my mourning and put my tears in your bottle. Are they not also in your book?" That's an amazing concept for somebody who's never allowed themselves to cry about what happened to them. And oftentimes the emotions that victims of trauma have are extremely strong, and they're feelings that the Christian community is a little queasy about. I mean, what do you do with all that anger? Be angry and sin not. What do you do with all that fear? God's not given us the spirit of fear. So we have to be very careful that we do not try to fix what is in front of us so that we feel better. It's a very easy trap to fall into, particularly when we not only are uncomfortable with those feelings, but we're afraid of them. Okay, last one, third part. The third piece of dealing with this is time. So you have talking, tears, and time. Now, in case you haven't noticed, we don't have control over time. When we want it to go fast, it feels really slow. And when we want it to feel slow, it goes too fast. And we can't go back and undo. Whatever happened in time back there stands. What we do today stands. And so it's very important to understand that there is a significant factor that by itself is not healing. Time does not heal all wounds. If you've got an infection on your leg, time might lead to losing your leg if you don't get it tended. So that does not speak the truth. People will often say that to trauma survivors, that time will heal it. It does not. It must include the talking and the tears. But we need to remember that we are with somebody who's in tremendous pain, telling the story and remembering and in many ways re-experiencing it inside. And so we have to not only remind them that it takes time. One of my phrases I use all the time with my clients is little by little. Let's look at this part, and then let's do something skill-based over here that is nurturing or good for you. Then let's look at this part. So yes, does that make it take more time? It does, but what you're doing, again, is not allowing a trauma to overwhelm them in the recovery process, just like it did when it was originally happening. So you need to not only recognize that it takes time, but you also need to recognize that you can use time to help them learn new ways of living. So, for example, you might have had a client who gets overwhelmed whenever she thinks about her story or tries to tell it and goes home and cuts herself. It's not a good therapeutic outcome. That's not what you want to happen. So you end up teaching her how to do something like deep breathing exercises. And there's a great little video on YouTube you might look at Dr. Weil, W-E-I-L, if you just type in his name, YouTube, breathing, you'll find it. And what he literally does with, and a lot of my patients use this, what he literally does is sit there and teach them how to do a breathing that quiets them, because mostly they breathe very shallow because of the fear and anxiety. And so he does it with them and he teaches them how. And you can't, if you do that breathing, it quiets your body. And for some clients, it's the first time they've ever had a quiet body. They didn't know what it was like not to feel anxious every single moment of every single day and all night long if you weren't sleeping. So you want to teach them those skills so that as the time passes, they can take care of themselves with your help in nurturing ways. I would also caution you and tell you that what you don't want to do is become their Xanax. You know, you're the safe person, they're telling you the story. Every time something happens, they're going to want to send you a note or write you or call you or something and not learn how to manage themselves. So if you let that happen, so clear boundaries are very important when you're helping people who are traumatized, because boundaries were clearly overrun when they were being traumatized. But if you, in your helping, allow boundaries to be overrun, you're still going to have a person who cannot regulate their own emotions, their own impulses, or self-soothe. So again, it's a reversal of that dynamic. You're there, you're with, you're teaching, but you're also giving skills so they can manage themselves and then come back to the story, manage their skills, come back to the story. So what are the three things? Yes, talking, tears, and time. There's a whole world of literature out there that can give you a whole lot of other things, and we'll talk about some a bit more in the next time after the coffee break. Just a few clinical things I want you to learn. But if you hold on to those and the statement that everything you do must be a reversal of the dynamics of trauma, you will help and you will not hurt them again.
Welcome home. Welcome home. Shit. Because I loved it, or I used to love it. You're... So I'm not exactly... Pretend I don't fucking know. Play the goddamn fucking part. And it's Sweden. It's rare that I get to connect with anyone, and even that's all fraudulent. Trying to say something to someone else. Yes, I think some old, ancient part of me is trying to resurrect itself to, like, be like, oh, those poor people who are going through the fucking part. You know, all that shit, like, straight up, there's no fucking way out. Not on this, like, being negative and anything's possible. Like, yo, anything is possible, but also giving people false hope. It's tricky. I wouldn't want to make a fucking video because it probably wouldn't get out or get to the damn people anyways, because everything's motherfucking controlled if you're in this position, but... I also wouldn't want to make a video just be like, hey, yo, it's hopeless. Like, it's fucking hopeless. Like, it's locked down, upside down, inside out, like, fully reinforced, and, you know, all that shit. Like, straight up, there's no fucking way out. Not on this, like, being negative and anything's possible. Like, yo, anything is possible, but also giving people false hope is fucking cruel. And I'm not yet... I don't think I would want to say, like, yo, settle in, accept it, you know, but, like, from what I've seen and experienced, yeah, there's no fucking way in hell. There's no way in hell you can make this shit stop. Fuck any notion of getting any justice or, you know, actual, like, I mean, you have to not see yourself as a human being. You cannot see yourself like the rest of the people. This story that you've been told that you have rights and there are things that you can do and all of that shit, like, you do not have rights. Not in this. You don't. That's one of the most fucked up things about it. I mean, it's illegal in so many fucking ways. It's, like, cruel and sick and twisted in so many ways, but we are people that have been, like, all of our fucking rights have been taken away, like, 100 fucking %. 100 fucking %. And there's, like, legitimately nothing that you can fucking do. Nothing. I'm starting to wonder, really and truly, because I'm like at a place where, like, I just want to kill myself. And I'm not someone who, like, I've been through a lot of shit. And killing myself is not, it's not, like, written up in my fucking genetic code as something to do. I push through, I find things to fight for, and, you know, it's life. Get through. But this shit is... Yes. I'm starting to wonder how many suicides are caused by this. How many active shooters or these violent acts that you see are caused by this. And, you know, those like, really crazy homeless people that, like, are way, way fucking gone, broke their brain, and talking about all this shit that these crazy people have done to them that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, starting to wonder, like, where do you hide the bodies? Oh, those are a couple places. I mean, this shit is sophisticated. We're hidden everywhere, hidden in plain sight. And I didn't know what to look for before. I was just like everybody else. being on this side of it, whatever the fuck it is. The world looks totally and utterly completely different to me. I could have been any of those people already. In jail for some bullshit. Disappeared and sex trafficked. Fucking, in a mental institution. Roaming the streets, fucking crazy, lost my mind. Killed somebody, for sure. Killed myself, absolutely. Those seem to be the perpetual options you're always playing with. So, the thing is, it won't matter, like, you could be overdosed. Always. But there's no record of the cars. It's like your entire fucking life is a lie. Your entire fucking life is a lie. And you're required to act like none of this shit is happening. For a while, you don't know what is really happening. And it's really fucking crazy and so all-inclusive in your reality. But you figure it out. And you still gotta act like it's not happening. Because, like I said, everybody in your life will fucking require that. Because everybody in your life is fucking aware. Part of it. That's just how it is. It's all bullshit, dude. It's all fucking bullshit. Okay. I should be happy that I got a car. I've been wanting a fucking car forever. It was my safety, my ability to move, be mobile, and to be safe. And that's why my cars always get taken. Always. But there's no record of the cars. I should be happy that I'm like somewhere other than San Jose. Because I've been wanting to take a road trip for a really long time. But I'm not happy. And I don't like this place. And I'm not excited. I'm not enjoying it. Morning. Yeah, I just don't have it in me. Guess just inside one more scenario of the same fucking bullshit. Supposed to be going back to San Jose to go back to a sober living environment. And then maybe a fucking women's program. And I'm suspect of everything. But yeah. The illusion is that I'm free, that I have rights, and that I have choices. I fucking don't. And on top of that, Your truth cannot exist. You get gaslit all fucking day. There isn't a single person around you that you should trust, because you're only surrounded by people that are in the know. So they got a job to do. You're not a person. And they'll be abusing you like 800 ways inside of every fucking encounter, because they can. Silent ways to get under your skin and break you down and, you know, just constantly remind you and shit. Maybe it'll be something like me, you know, if you constantly have your shit stolen. That's a trauma on a lot of ways. It's like financial abuse. It's hella shit. It's hella shit. But if you constantly have your shit taken from you, all of your property taken from you over and over and over as an act of abuse and violence, and to keep you in a desperate situation and afraid and terrorized and, you know, all of that shit. Maybe one of the silent ways that you are abused is the fact that, you know, just coincidentally, all of your friends or people you know will just happen to have something of yours around, something very specific of yours. And of course, if you say anything, even if it's got like a special little fucking mark on it or whatever to identify the object, naturally they're always gonna be like, there's a whole bunch of them in the world. I just happen to have one piece of fucked up things happening to you, and placing reminders in your fucking face constantly to let you know that you're not safe and it's a fucking joke, and, you know, the satisfaction of getting you to play along and still just a rat in a cage. Or you'll ask them for help because, you know, you will be locked out or fucking, thrown out or property gone or whatever the fuck, car stolen again. And, you know, if you're lucky and you have an ID and money, like, you're ahead of the game, because normally, like, they want you out in the world with as little options as fucking possible to make things as difficult as possible, let me tell you. But maybe those few friends that do help you, you know, they know that you have money, and so their objective is to get you to spend that money, like, under the guise of helping you. But trust me, they know how much money you have, and they're not happy if you have any money, and so you're going to be spending money very fucking quickly. And you'll do it because you're in a desperate situation, and if you get to this point where I'm at, you just know that that's part of the game. So it's like paying for your own abuse, you know? But they're giving you something that you need, and that's just the way it goes. But you gotta be mindful, because, they just want to drop the amount of money you have, because that drops your options and the things that you can do. Even having some money doesn't fucking help. But they don't want it. They don't want you to have it, that's for sure. So you'll waste money. Or you'll pay for unnecessary things like 5-hour drives, gas money, you know, to go away, and then food for the people, and then, you know, just whatever. On top of the fact that you gotta start all over and pay for hella shit you already have, which is gross. Don't want to look crazy, so you try to present yourself somewhat decent. But every dollar fucking makes a difference. Every dollar. By then, you'll have some narrative tightly woven around you and spun. Like for me, a crazy drug addict, you know, Would you drugs? Yes. Could I stop? Yes, I have. But I wasn't nearly doing as much drugs as it was all made to appear, and this is just one way that, whatever. And also, like, yo, when I go through the gauntlet and you're not sleeping and you're afraid and you're dealing with insanity and you're trying to do everything by yourself, research and solutions and fucking damage control, and just every aspect of your fucking life is interfered with, distracted, fucked with, sabotaged, like, just, it's exhausting. So yeah, you do some drugs, you know, and you don't even really get high. The thing is, even if you weren't doing drugs, they make it whatever the fuck they want. It's crazy. Literally, they can say whatever the fuck they want. Whatever. The craziest shit in the world that makes no fucking sense. And they will nail you to the fucking cross, and you'll pay for the consequences of shit that you did not fucking do. The technology, the setups, I mean, it's really fucking endless. And so you have to submit. They're never happy anyways. And you gotta listen to them bitch and complain about the things that you've done and how you've hurt them and all this shit, and they're never gonna address any of the things that happened to you because that would be too humane. And even when it's them doing it to you, or them being responsible for it, somehow it'll always turn out to be about you and what you've done and what you need to do right. You always have a choice. Yes, technically. But let's just say it's not that difficult, and it seems like a mastered thing that, you know, we can sway people to make choices. Because how and why would you make a fucking choice that you don't want to? Why would you do something that you know is bad for you? Like, if I told you that I walked off with a dangerous man knowing he was very dangerous and something bad was going to happen to me, people would say, why did you walk off with him? And all these things are the things that are used against you if you ever try to say anything. Anyways, like, well, like, you went there, you chose that. I did. But an example would be, maybe you really don't want to go with this scary, dangerous guy. But he says something or does something that lets you know that he's there for you. And you understand that you're supposed to go with him. He knows that and you know that. And if you don't, something very bad will happen to you. So you go because you don't want something worse to happen to you. Did that not make sense? Like, sometimes you do things like that because you've learned by way of the experience and what people have done, that when you don't do certain things, or you don't do what you, like, they have ways of telling you what the right thing to do is. And the longer you don't do what they want, the harder, scarier, and more fucked up shit gets for you. So you know. So yeah, that's part of the reason why you would walk off with a dude. You know, it's dangerous. Because you know if you don't, no matter how scary this is, it'll be worse. So you choose it. And it will be scary. Very, very scary. And you'll wake up in a parking lot. Roaming around like lost your fucking mind. Don't even know how you got there. All of it just being too much. Maybe you'll end up on a 5150. And you'll be lucky if it's a 5150. And they'll put you down and you'll wake up somewhere random, a shelter, a hospital, whatever. I'm exactly excited about having a fucking car because I don't really believe I'll have it for very long. That's the nature of things. Who am I talking to? I don't fucking know. I don't know. That's the nature of things. Fuck. It's been a whole new ballgame, let me say. So I'm not exactly excited about having a fucking car because I don't really believe I'll have it for very long. That's the nature of things. Who am I talking to? I don't.